Good day, and welcome to the first in a series of podcasts about a foreign intelligence service for Canada, a series put together by the Policy Insights Forum. I'm Geoff St. John. I will be the moderator for the series. I'm a retired officer of the Canadian Armed Forces Intelligence Branch, and I'm now Director of the National Security Studies Program of the Policy Insights Forum. The Forum is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit unit of the Samuel Group of companies. It seeks to engage some of Canada's best minds on public policy issues. And this podcast series will indeed have a distinguished group of panelists. The creation of a Canadian Foreign Intelligence Service is a topic which has not received much in the way of balanced commentary. So we at the Policy Insight Forum have resolved to correct that. In doing so, the Forum will not take a position on whether Canada should or should not have a foreign intelligence service. Rather, the podcasts, taken together, will seek to present a balanced view. We will look at both the pros and the cons of a Canadian Foreign Intelligence Service. There will be 7 podcasts in all. Topics to be discussed will include why Canada does not have a foreign intelligence service already, whether Canada should or should not create one, whether such a service should be part of or separate from Canada's domestic intelligence agency, that is, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, and how non-governmental and international organizations might perceive such a service. Today's podcast will set the stage for the rest of them by considering some of the basics of what is called espionage. Because a Canadian Foreign Intelligence Service would acquire enemy secrets by means of espionage, which is a special kind of intelligence collection. So this broadcast is meant to be a primer on the art of espionage. This primer is a necessary introduction to the podcast series because of the many misunderstandings about the art. What do you think you know about espionage? Do you believe that it is so secret that only those actually in the spy business can talk about it? Do you think that it is mostly a violent profession, about killing people and destroying things, as we see in many movies and read in many books? Isn't espionage at its center really all about betrayal and deceit? And do you believe that a foreign intelligence service is there to report every day on the secrets behind current events? All these views are wrong. I will deal with each one of these myths in the podcast. But let us first step back for a minute and talk about intelligence generally. Intelligence is simply analyzed information. An intelligence analyst gathers as much relevant raw information as is reasonably possible. The analyst then assesses each piece of the raw information. Is it true? Is it relevant? Is it important? And then write an intelligence assessment. The raw information from which the analyst draws comes from different sources. Signals intelligence, the interception, and if necessary, the decoding of enemy communications. Imagery intelligence, photographs and other kinds of imagery acquired by satellites, aircraft, drones, or people. And human intelligence, information from people. Human intelligence comes in a variety of forms. Classified reports, prepared by Canadian diplomats serving in our embassies, and which are based on what foreign government officials tell our diplomats in confidence, are one kind of human intelligence. Answers from prisoners of war questioned by Canadian soldiers on the battlefield are another form of human intelligence. And secrets acquired from foreigners by means of espionage are a type of human intelligence. So espionage is but one kind of human intelligence, and human intelligence is but one kind of intelligence. So far, I have talked about what are normally secret sources of intelligence. But there is another kind of information that is very important to an intelligence analyst. Information from open sources, like the media, or state-controlled broadcasters, or books, or academic papers. One example would be the text of a public speech by Vladimir Putin. In fact, many important intelligence assessments are based primarily on open source information, not on secret intelligence. What secret intelligence may bring to the table is that extra 5 or 10% of fact and insight that special ingredient which turns an important assessment into a critical one. Let's now return to espionage, which, as I have said, is one kind of human intelligence. How can espionage be defined? Well, I have a simple definition. Spies secretly stealing secrets. Each word of the definition merits a bit of explanation, so let's look at each one. Spies secretly stealing secrets. Spies, who are usually called agents by professional intelligence officers, are foreigners induced to spy for an espionage service. So, for example, an MI6 agent is not British, but is instead a Russian, or an Iranian, or a North Korean, one who spies on behalf of an MI6 intelligence officer, and that intelligence officer is British. The professional meaning of the word agent is very important to remember. Agents are foreigners, not citizens of your own country, and not Foreign Intelligence Service officers. Spies secretly stealing secrets. Espionage is a clandestine act. That is, the country or organization being spied on is never supposed to learn that it has been spied on. Successful espionage leaves no traces. If a country does learn that it has been the victim of espionage, it can take remedial action, thus negating the value of the intelligence acquired by the espionage service. So, if a Canadian espionage service learned that Iran had a nuclear weapons facility in a particular secret location, and Iran found out that Canada knew, Iran could then move to the facility to a different, unknown location. Spies secretly stealing secrets. Espionage requires the spy to take information illegally, to steal it, and pass it on to an intelligence officer. So the information is taken without the consent of the country or organization which owns that information. In most countries, spying is a criminal act, so espionage officers, by definition, aid and abet criminal activity by their agents. Espionage is, almost always, theft. Spies secretly stealing secrets. A foreign espionage service does not want information that can be had for the price of a subscription to the New York Times. Rather, the service goes after secrets, information our enemies want to prevent us from learning. You now know what espionage is. Spies secretly stealing secrets. I must add here that I'm not contending that the human intelligence acquired by espionage is the best kind of secret intelligence. In fact, the best kind of intelligence in any given case depends on the nature of the target more than anything else. Still, a human agent, one who is, for example, part of the inner circle of an enemy leader, can provide priceless intelligence. A human agent can often answer the very important question, why, which other kinds of intelligence normally cannot. But espionage is also the most operationally and morally hazardous kind of intelligence collection. It is operationally hazardous because it is the most dangerous and difficult kind of intelligence collection. The espionage officer and his agent must take extreme care so the operation is not uncovered by the security service of the agent's country. The agent's freedom, even her life, is on the line if the agent's country learns she has been spying. And it is morally hazardous for reasons I will soon relate. Thus, the other kinds of intelligence collection should be used before resorting to intelligence. It is, in fact, the last resort of intelligence. But isn't everything about espionage classified secret or top secret? Some listeners may protest that little can be usefully said about espionage in a public forum, since most of the things about it are secret. In fact, numerous excellent books and articles about espionage have been written, and all of them, of course, are available to anyone with an interest in the subject. These books can tell you just about everything you want to know about the art. Some of the better books to read include MI6, Life and Death in the British Secret Service by Gordon Correra. Correra is a journalist, not a former Secret Service officer. The Recruiter by Douglas London, a former CIA clandestine officer. And The Spy and the Traitor by Ben McIntyre, a professional author. Espionage is what a Canadian Foreign Intelligence Service would do. Espionage officers do not go around killing people or blowing things up or engaging in armed commando raids on secret enemy facilities. This violent notion of espionage is Hollywood fiction. Rather, espionage officers look for people, foreigners, who can tell us things our country needs to know in order to navigate the treacherous waters of international affairs. A Canadian espionage service would induce foreigners to tell us what they know about threats to Canada and to its allies. What are an agent's motives for spying? Say a Canadian Foreign Intelligence Service officer recruits a Russian as an agent, a Russian who has access to Russian secrets, like the plans for the next stage of war against Ukraine. Why would the Russian agree to spy on his country for a country like Canada? Well, spies spy for a number of reasons, usually more than one, though like all human beings trying to explain their motives for doing this or that, the spy may not be able to articulate precisely why she chooses to spy. There's an acronym for the possible motives of a spy, MISR: money, ideology, compromise, ego, and revenge. This list is not quite complete, as I will relate in a minute. First, money. Money is in many cases the prime motive. The belief that a spy normally is inclined to spy for lofty motives is, sadly, not the case. Most people like having more money, and so may choose to engage in questionable activity to get it. Still, some spies are ideologically motivated. Some do spy for what we might call the right reasons. They may decide that what their country is doing is murderous, immoral, or corrupt. Dismayed by his country's policies, the person agrees to spy for another country, that is, one he considers to be a better nation. Compromise. Some spies have been blackmailed or otherwise coerced into becoming spies. They have been compromised. Soviet and Russian intelligence services, in particular, are known for their crude blackmail of adulterous or gay persons. Western intelligence services tend to be more scrupulous regarding blackmail, and in fact, some of those Western services assert they do not resort to blackmail at all. Ego. In more than a few cases, a spy's ego plays a major role in espionage. Some agents want to believe, to feel deep down, that their spying is going to change the world. Others simply like being the lead actors in their own secret pièce de théâtre. Revenge. Another less exalted motive is revenge. Spies in some cases seek vengeance on their superiors because their work is not given what the spy thinks is adequate credit, or the spy thinks he is being denied a deserved promotion. Money, ideology, compromise, ego, revenge. But that list of motives is not quite complete. There is almost always another motive, that is, friendship. An agent can be a lonely, insecure person. The agent in most cases finds, in the espionage officer who controls him, a friend. The agent thus has someone with whom he can share his feelings, someone to whom the agent believes he can pour his heart out to. In fact, it is usually the case that potential agents and agents consider the espionage officers to be their friends. There you have it in a nutshell. Most of the different motives that drive a spy to be a spy. It is worth adding that an espionage officer will try to convince the agent that her spying is justified in the circumstances. An agent must, if possible, be made to believe that what she is doing is the right thing to do. How do espionage officers make use of these motives? Above all, espionage requires psychological manipulation. The espionage officer figures out what motivates the potential agent. He then tries to make those motives stronger. The espionage officer tries to make the potential agent go from just unhappy to very unhappy about what the agent's country is doing. Or she causes him to be even more angry because he is not being promoted. Or she tells the prospective agent that by spying he's going to help change the world for the better. There is an element of psychological manipulation in every espionage operation. Bribery is another tactic used by espionage officers. Recall that I said that money is frequently a motive for spying. Cold, hard cash normally is paid to grease the espionage skids. And I've already talked about another espionage tactic, that is, blackmail. Some aver that trying to blackmail someone into committing espionage doesn't work. In fact, sophisticated blackmail can work very well. Rather than making a crude threat, as in, tell us what we want to know or we will tell your spouse you are cheating, there is a better way. The espionage officer, having struck up a friendship with the potential agent, arranges to put him in a very difficult position, one that seems to offer no way out. Or the officer simply capitalizes on the difficult position the potential agent is already in. The potential agent needs help to get out of the jam, and the espionage officer gives it, and so helps the prospective agent deal with the situation. The prospective agent now feels deeply indebted to the officer. He is thus much more likely to hand over the sensitive secrets of his country to the officer. Psychological manipulation, bribery, blackmail, all tools in the toolbox of espionage. And, if we're being honest, we would acknowledge that parents sometimes use these tools too with their children. But it is no small matter for an espionage service to get to the point where a foreigner agrees to spy for it. Imagine you work for a Canadian espionage service, and imagine further your target is the illicit Iranian nuclear weapons program. Who better to tell you the secrets of that weapons program than an Iranian who already works inside of it? Now comes one of the many hard parts of espionage, finding a possible agent. From a variety of sources, open and secret, a list is drawn up of Iranian engineers, scientists, and physicists suspected or known to be involved in nuclear matters. Those who might be persuaded to spy for your espionage service. Make no mistake, this is long, hard, painstaking work, far from the glamorous portrayal of spying brought to you by Hollywood. From this list must be chosen those Iranians who would seem most likely to have access to the Iranian secrets the espionage service wants to steal. A few of these Iranians are then put under secret surveillance. Their home telephones are tapped, their computers are hacked. All of this is to seek for weaknesses, something the potential agent does that he needs to keep secret from family, friends, and colleagues, say a gambling addiction. As one British MI6 officer once said, the professional skill of espionage is the manipulation of human weakness. This search for weaknesses is time-consuming and difficult, so it is not something that you will ever see in a spy movie. Eventually, the espionage service would likely find a man or woman with exploitable weaknesses. The espionage officer, though of course he professes to be a businessman or something equally innocuous, the officer now contrives to meet that person, the prospective agent, and strike up an acquaintance. The aim is for the intended agent to eventually see the espionage officer as a trustworthy person. This is the development phase of an espionage operation. The targeted person, sooner or later, comes to depend on the relationship he has with the officer for a measure of his happiness. Development usually takes months. One CIA officer took 2 years trying to develop a prospective North Korean agent. To repeat, the espionage officer works to gain the potential agent's trust. Once that trust is gained, the officer can then pose the question subtly or bluntly, will you spy for us? Though obviously the officer may begin by asking for something relatively harmless, like an internal telephone directory of the organization the agent works in. If the prospective agent has been carefully manipulated during a relationship that has probably lasted months, he will say yes. Eventually the agent, as he now is, will be asked to provide real secrets. The spying part of the operation has thus begun. With much care and some luck, the agent's spying will not be uncovered by the security people of the agent's country, and he will go on passing secrets to the espionage officer for years. Let's be clear, espionage is partly about betrayal. The agent of an espionage service betrays the country that employs her in secret work. And espionage is partly about deceit. The espionage officer seeks to convince the agent that he is the agent's best friend, when in fact the officer is playing on the agent's emotions. And at least at the start, the officer pretends to be something other than an intelligence officer. But these points obscure important facts. Espionage is not only about betrayal and deceit. As Baroness Daphne Park, the first MI6 female officer, once said, it's a world of trust. It is about both trust and truth-telling. The officer must trust that his agent is reporting the truth. The agent, in turn, trusts the officer. He trusts the officer to keep her identity secret. Whatever fictional spy novels and films try to tell us, espionage officers are in fact very protective of their agents. Sometimes, protecting the agent is more important than gaining the intelligence. They certainly do not casually betray their agents. Instead, they go to great lengths to look after them. By now you will have hit upon an important truth. The chemistry, the trust between the espionage officer and her agent is the most important facet of any espionage operation, more important than the intelligence gained. For without trust and good chemistry, there is no intelligence. I have explained that both making the list of potential agents and putting them under close surveillance and the careful manipulation of at least one of them are time-consuming projects. Espionage is a gradual, careful, painstaking art. It could take months, even years, to successfully begin an espionage operation. So espionage reporting isn't like CNN. Agents can rarely report in a timely fashion on the secrets behind revolutions, wars, and other pressing events. That means the targets of an espionage service must be those which pose a continuing, long-term threat. An enemy country's illicit nuclear weapons program is one example. In other words, the espionage targets must be strategic in nature. So who decides in a democracy what the targets of an espionage service are to be? One possibility, of course, is to let the espionage service pick its own targets. But doing that is a recipe for failure or mischief or both. A nation's policies, foreign policy, defense policy, etc., should determine what the targets of an espionage service are. It follows that those who decide what the nation's policy should be should also be the ones who select the targets of a country's espionage service. In Canada's case, ministers and the Prime Minister, advised by senior public servants, should be the ones who pick the espionage targets. However, care must be taken to ensure that the espionage service is not given too many targets. A Canadian Foreign Espionage Service would not be as large as the American CIA or even the British MI6. So it would be incumbent upon ministers to be careful in assigning targets. A Canadian service could spy on Russian military plans and equipment, or on nuclear weapons proliferation, or on illicit drug manufacture and shipment, or on Chinese research into artificial intelligence and quantum computing. It could not spy on all these things at the same time. To sum up, I've tried to dispel some of the myths about espionage. Espionage is spies secretly stealing secrets. The fundamentals of the art can be understood by anyone with a little research and common sense thinking on his or her part. There are plenty of good books and articles on the subject from which virtually everything about espionage can be learned. It is not a violent profession. Rather, it is subtle, gradual, even in a sense gentle. Finding out enemy secrets is a quiet job, one that leaves no traces. Now, espionage is, of course, in part about betrayal and deceit. But even more important, it is also about trust, above all, the trust between the espionage officer and the agent. Small espionage services, of the size that Canada could afford, cannot spy on everything all the time. Instead, the number of targets must be limited so that the spy resources can be concentrated. And espionage cannot be a secret CNN. Agents cannot be recruited and then begin reporting virtually overnight. In this podcast, I've only scratched the surface of the murky world of espionage. Much more can and will be said in succeeding podcasts. Yet a listener to this podcast, if he or she has taken what I have said today to heart, now knows more about the craft of espionage than virtually any other Canadian. I invite you to listen to the next podcast, which will address the issue of why Canada does not already have a foreign espionage service. The podcast panelist will be the Dean of Canadian Intelligence Historians, Professor Wesley Wark. With me, he will discuss the reasons behind why Canada has never created a foreign intelligence service. And the next podcast will be available at our web link in the second half of February. Thank you for listening today.